National Indigenous Peoples Day today, a day to celebrate the heritage and culture of Canada's Indigenous peoples and their contribution to our society. But this year, the reality of how Canada treats Indigenous people is under intense scrutiny. Just last month, a First Nation in British Columbia said preliminary ground radar findings show 215 remains are buried at a former residential school in Kamloops. Grand Chief Stuart Phillip is the president of the Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs. He's in Penticton, British Columbia. Grand Chief Phillip, thank you for joining me.
Good afternoon.
I wonder if we could start with you telling us what today personally means to you, how important National Indigenous Peoples Day is for you.
Well, it's a significant day for us in terms of celebrating our long, arduous struggle to gain some sense of recognition in a very racist post-colonial society. And this didn't come easy. It took a lot of hard work for us to establish this day of recognition. And, you know, we hope someday it becomes a national holiday.
You issued a statement today, sir, calling on Canada to repudiate colonial processes and to hold itself accountable for what you call its legacy of colonialism, racism, and denial. What would that look like in reality to you?
Well, it's going to take a paradigm shift from where we're currently at. What we hear from Canada are these grandiose, theatrical, public statements that are emotional but empty in terms of the commitments that are made on behalf of the Government of Canada and the follow-through. And so what that guarantees is the status quo, and that's unacceptable.
Has there been some progress that you can point to? I know last week UNDRIP became the law. The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Persons became the law of the country, and that will now start a process to change some of the structural issues you highlight. How important a step is that on the path to reconciliation?
Well, we're nowhere near an A, B, or C plus. I'd say we're south of a C minus. And albeit that the passing of the UN Declaration on the Human Rights of Indigenous Peoples bill that passed through the Senate is a significant development, the true measure of reconciliation must be taken on the ground itself. And in that regard, we still have abysmal rates of infant mortality. Children are apprehended on a ever increasing basis. We have an epidemic of youth suicides. Indigenous women are continuing to be kidnapped and murdered. So the housing situation has given rise to an unprecedented homeless situation in regard to Indigenous peoples. And that in turn has put a lot of young people on the streets in harm's way. And so I would say that when one looks at the reality on the ground, we haven't really moved to where we need to be.
A lot of this day is happening so close to the announcement of the discovery at the residential school in Kamloops. A moment, I think, that sees the attention of the country quite significantly. Do you see that changing the conversation and maybe being a catalyst for action, the type of action that you've outlined you want to see?
Well, as I see it, this represents a very significant opportunity for Canadians, for government, for the institutions in this country, such as the healthcare system, education, business and commerce, to take a hard look at the status quo and the racist, prejudiced attitudes they carry into engagement with First Nations and make a determination that this is unacceptable, that Canada, our children and grandchildren deserve better. And we have to start at the top, and leadership at every level, from the Prime Minister on down, needs to condemn and repudiate racist acts, hateful acts, violence, and do it in a very consistent way, and walk the walk in terms of serious legislative reform that reverses the unfair situation that is the consequence is our economic marginalization and, you know, our absolutely horrible social statistics.
You know, there have been some calls to cancel Canada Day celebrations this year after Kamloops and the discovery there, the conversations about symbols in this country, whether it's a statue of John A. Macdonald or Egerton Ryerson. What are your thoughts on whether Canada Day should be a celebration in 2021?
Well, clearly, I don't think it should be a celebration, certainly for the Indigenous peoples of this country. We really don't have any reason to celebrate. As you pointed out, in the aftermath of the grisly Kamloops Indian residential school system, which we know is not an isolated incident, that there are similar discoveries right across this country in terms of the residential schools. So our local mayor here in Penticton canceled Canada Day, and I commend him for doing that. Victoria, Port Hardy followed suit, and I salute those leaders, the mayors and councils, for knowing and understanding that their dear friends, their Indigenous neighbors, are mourning the devastating blow of the Kamloops Indian residential school discovery, and don't feel it's a time to be out celebrating and shooting off fireworks and waving the Canadian flag around. So it takes leadership, it takes courage, it takes integrity. And we need more than these eloquent, fluffy statements from Mr. Trudeau and other leaders. We need concrete action that's going to make a difference in the lives of Indigenous people at the ground level.
Grand Chief Stuart Phillip, I want to thank you very much for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.